Morgan. What do you have for us today?
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the silent twins.
Oh.
And this was actually one of the recommendations, right, that you got on TikTok.
Yes,
it was through your TikTok.
Yes.
So I figured I'd go ahead and cover it. Aubrey and Gloria Gibbons were in search for a more fulfilling life. They were part of something called the Windrush generation. So the Windrush generation was a sort of movement, I guess you'd call it, where after World War II, many African Caribbean people were migrating to North America and Europe, but specifically the United Kingdom, because due to the losses of the war, the British government was really encouraging mass immigration to fill shortages in like labor fields and just to get more workers.
Right.
And this attracted the Gibbons family, a sense of job security, being able to provide for their babies. They joined the movement. In 1960, Aubrey Gibbons moved from Barbados to the United Kingdom, leaving his wife Gloria and their 2 children back home in search for a job. He stayed with a relative in Coventry and shortly after got hired as a technician with the Royal Air Force. A couple months later, his wife, Gloria, and their 2 babies, Greta, who was 3, and David, who was 1, joined Aubrey in the United Kingdom. Within a couple years, Aubrey was deployed and sent overseas to Aden, Yemen. Is that how you say that country?
I literally couldn't tell you.
Yemen. I don't know.
We'll
Sorry,
see.
Marley. The family moved with him, living on base, but it wasn't an easy move because Gloria was pregnant. And she was pregnant with twins.
Oh, my God.
On April 11th, 1963, Gloria gave birth to her 2 daughters, June and Jennifer, at a military hospital in Yemen.
I love their names.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's
June and
really
Jennifer.
beautiful.
Later that year, Aubrey was transferred once again back to England, where the family then moved to the Royal Air Force Base in Lytton, Yorkshire. And then a couple months later, got transferred again and moved to Haverfordwest, Wales. First off, if I was Gloria,
I'd be like,
I would be so pissed.
look, I just had these kids.
Moving 3 times, once pregnant with
Yeah.
2 babies, and twice with 2 twin newborns and toddlers.
Oh, that?
Hell no.
That is hell.
That is a lot.
That is, I mean,
That's a lot on a woman.
I hated going on vacation when my little sisters were younger. It was just a hassle. I couldn't imagine moving.
Especially as a military family, you know that they have to set up their house by
Yes.
themselves because the husbands are always working.
Right.
So it
And
would
you don't really have
become
family to
a
like,
lot.
especially since they had just moved to this country. Like, they didn't have a lot of family living near them, you know?
Yeah. So I would be a little pissed. But,
Yeah.
June and Jennifer, the twins, they were happy little girls. When they hit the age that they should be speaking, Gloria and Aubrey noticed that they were pretty far behind the rest of the toddlers their age when it came to language skills, but not in a way that they weren't talking necessarily, because they were relatively quiet. But what was concerning was that the girls only, 1, spoke to each other, and 2, spoke in their own language that even their parents couldn't understand. Their father, Aubrey, recalled, quote, "In the home, they talk, make sounds and all that, but we knew that they weren't quite like, normal children."
Got it.
And with that, the girls were unusually inseparable.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like this is similar with like most sets of twins.
Yeah.
Like you have to think like when you're young, especially when you're young, it's like having a built-in BFF. They're
Right.
the same age as you. You're doing every single thing together.
Right.
So I don't
You dress the same. You look the same. Like.
Right. I feel like it's really common, but to June and Jennifer, they were really each other's world and nobody else mattered.
I mean, they literally have their own language.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they began withdrawing from their family, keeping only to themselves and each other. And their language that seemed to resemble like a sped up Bajan Creole. I hope I said that right. Bajan Creole is an English-based language. Mm-hmm. Well, their language became more unintelligible to others. When the twins were 8 years old, they moved to Devon, again, another move, when their dad was posted to the Royal Air Force Base in Shivnor. Oh. Sorry to all of our people out there in United Kingdom that I'm literally butchering every word.
Literally, sorry, Marley. Sorry to the entire world.
Right, exactly. And this move happened around the same age that the kids would be in elementary school. And moving to a new school, well, that's pretty hard already to get acclimated, make some friends, and not be known as, quote, like the new kid.
Yeah.
But it was especially hard for the twins and the rest of the Gibbons kids because they were the only African-American children in the entire school and the entire community.
Wow.
They were constantly bullied for the color of their skin, leaving them to feel ostracized from the rest of the students and, the community.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they wouldn't speak to anybody, only each other. And when they did, it was their own language. And to other kids, this is totally out of the norm,
Right.
And so it was just leaving them to be bullied even more.
But it's like, why would they even want to talk to the people that are assholes to them?
Like if they're...
Right. Like, exactly. I would be like, I don't even care to talk to you guys. We have our own language.
Right.
Like,
I don't need to talk to you. One, you're assholes.
Yeah.
You're bullying me for the color
you're
of my
racist
skin.
assholes.
Yeah.
Little kids.
So this was pretty fucking traumatic for them. And it had gone so bad that school administrators were dismissing the twins early, just about every single day from school to try and help avoid bullying after school hours. By age 11, the twins would refuse to read or write at school, exclude anybody and everybody, including their parents, and were literally silent except to each other.
Oh my God.
And at this time, nobody was worried about the girls. Not teachers, not the administration, not even their parents. It wasn't until 1976 when a medic named John Reese had arrived at the girls' school to distribute tuberculosis vaccines. And when it came time for the girls, they were very, impassive. Their actions and their demeanor were so worrisome to John that he contacted a child psychiatrist. He said that their behavior was, quote, doll-like and unlike any other child getting a shot. Like, they were unusually not reactive. Like, they were just, expressionless.
Like, numb.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
The child psychiatrist immediately insisted that the girls be enrolled into therapy. And they were. But after seeing several psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists, the girls left everyone baffled. They were a literal mystery, and they continued to refuse to speak to anybody but themselves. In February of 1977, a speech therapist named Anne Treharn met with June and Jennifer. And with Anne, the girls would still not talk, but there was a bit of a breakthrough. Because the twins told Anne that she could leave a recorder in the room. Well, they didn't tell her. She suggested it, and they,
Yeah, and they,
that's
stared at her blankly.
They allowed Anne to leave a recorder in the room to record the girls conversing with each other when they were by themselves.
Okay.
And what she found was startling. June wanted to speak to Anne, but June was not allowed to do so by Jennifer.
Oh.
And Anne said that Jennifer's demeanor was very odd and interesting. She would sit there with no expression, where June was just a little bit more interactive with her reactions. The speech therapist Anne later said that, quote, this is really chilling, Jennifer sat there with an expressionless gaze, but I felt her power. The thought entered my mind that June was possessed by her twin.
I have chills all over my body.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Anne's recommendation was that the girls needed to be separated with hopes that they could develop some sense of self, maybe break out of their own world and open up to others. So the decision was made to send the twins to 2 different boarding schools. But this made everything worse. Both girls withdrew entirely into themselves. People described it as almost catatonic.
God.
Sorry, butcher it again.
It's okay.
They weren't just staying silent. They weren't moving, eating, drinking. At one point, June could not get out of bed. It took 2 people to pull her out as she was propped up against a wall, expressionless, and later described as her body being stiff and heavy like a corpse. Because this experiment of separating the girls, sending them to 2 different boarding schools, clearly failed, it was only making them worse, the girls were then reunited back at home. And when they got back together, they became closer than ever. They stayed in their bedroom, isolated from their entire family and the rest of the world. And the majority of their time was spent with playing with dolls and making these elaborate plays with them. A lot of people said they were soap opera plays.
Wow.
They would read them aloud to each other and even record them on tapes. Some sense of normalcy for their parents, hearing that their daughters are up there playing with toys, talking. So on Christmas Day, 1979, the twins were gifted a pair of diaries from their parents. where they became very interested in creative writing. They would write stories and poems and novels, but each story just a little darker than the last one. Most stories took place in the United States, but specifically Malibu. They had like an obsession with Malibu.
Okay.
Sorry, Gizzy's popping up.
Gizzy's literally getting choked between your chest and the chair. I was trying to pull you back a little bit.
One story titled The Pepsi Cola Addict was written by June, and it was about a young teenager who was seduced by his high school teacher, sent away to a reformatory school where a homosexual guard would make plays for him. The girls put all of their money and got The Pepsi Cola Addict published by Vanity Press.
What?
But each story was mostly focused on young men and women who were exhibiting strange and criminal behavior. Jennifer's story, The Pugilist, was about a physician who was so desperate to save his child's life that he killed the family dog to obtain its heart for his child's transplant. But the dog spirit lived on through the child and got revenge on the father.
Oh.
And another story of Jennifer's was titled Discomania, and it was about a young girl who discovered that the atmosphere of a local disco would basically brainwash everyone into like insane violence.
Oh.
And also in the diaries, they would talk about their relationship with each other. Once Jennifer had written, "We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes. We feel the irritating, deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin. I say to myself, can I get rid of my own shadow? Impossible or not possible? Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free, or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with, a face of misery, deception, and murder." That's what she wrote about her sister.
Oh my God. Wait, is this the one that was controlling?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Jennifer. In the summer of 1981, the girls' behavior took a turn for the worse. The then 18-year-old twins became involved with alcohol, drugs, boys, and petty crimes like vandalism and a little bit of petty theft. But then the crimes began to escalate, especially when the girls were charged with arson of 3 different buildings.
Oh my God.
And they were arrested. But because of their bizarre behavior, they were placed in a maximum security hospital for the criminally insane, a place called Broadmoor Hospital. And they were sentenced to indefinite detention under the Mental Health Act of 1983.
So I keep asking myself, is this because they really were showing like extreme sign of like weird and troubling behavior? And were they actually getting the help that they needed with being a minority in the community that they were and like already being outcasted throughout their entire like school and like community
especially in the 1980s.
Yeah, and then they're putting them in this max security forever instead of just getting more specialists.
Instead of going to a juvenile detention center where they would have probably gotten like 2 years.
Like maybe even 2 years.
Yeah.
Like that's where I'm like, where do we draw the line at? Like I'm kind of confused, but keep going.
So after their, I guess you would call it their sentencing, the girls continued to document their feelings in their diary. And this is an extract from June's diary written the day after they were sentenced to go to Broadmoor. She says, "Spinning in circles, sick, mental, psychopathic. Imagine how I felt. Me, a mental psychopath, a dangerous, evil, ruthless criminal. Me. At last, my torment, my self-consciousness, my violence is known. I am labeled. Now I know my fate. June Allison Gibbons, age just 19, going down in history as a psychopath. Please, God, don't let me suffer as much in my new life as I have here. Let me be bold enough to speak openly. Let me trust the doctors and nurses and no longer be afraid of people. For the past 7 months, I've been with a soul with no hope. Don't let this disease paralyze me again, destroying my abilities, tying up my tongue like firewood." Oh. Like she's like begging.
She
to
literally
be able to talk.
She just wants to talk.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so awful.
And the doctors at Broadmoor, they weren't as lenient as the twins' parents in previous schools had been, with letting their actions go on, like being so tied up with each other. They began treating the twins with high doses of antipsychotic medicines instead of letting them retreat into their own world. And for the next 12 years, the girls remained at Broadmoor.
12 years.
And their time there was not easy. Their medication led to them not being able to concentrate, and Jennifer developed something called Tardive Dyskinesia, which is a neurological disorder that resulted in involuntary and repetitive movements. The doctors thought that they were deeply disturbed and deeply dangerous. Some days, only one twin would eat, and then the next day, the other sister would indulge as her sister starved. Nurses would find them frozen in the same pose, even though they were locked in cells on the opposite ends of the hospital.
Oh, my God.
During their time at Broadmoor, they didn't talk to anybody except for a woman named Marjorie Wallace. Marjorie, that's right.
Marjorie, yeah.
They liked Marjorie because she liked their novel that they had written prior to this, the Pepsi Cola one.
Got it.
Marjorie spent every weekend with the twins at Broadmoor. The girls would let Marjorie read their diary entries, which involved a lot about how they felt trapped and even possessed and tortured by the other twin. One of June's entries says, "Nobody suffers the way I do. Not with a sister, with a husband, yes. With a wife, yes. With a child, yes. But this sister of mine, a dark shadow robbing me of sunlight, is my one and only torment." Throughout the decade they were there, Marjorie fought hard for the girls to get out of Broadmoor, but not as hard as June did. June went to the extent of writing a letter to the Queen explaining their situation, but got no response. Marjorie was contacting any and every psychiatrist, psychologist, and even the Department of Health. She wrote articles in newspapers fighting for the twins to be discharged. And finally, after 12 years, the doctors at Broadmoor announced that they would be transferring the twins to Caswell Clinic, which is a lot lesser security. It's still like a mental hospital, but it's a lot lesser. They're at like a maximum
max security.
Yeah, insane. So they said that we'll transfer the twins to Caswell, where hopefully after a year there, the twins would then be released and they'd be able to rejoin the world. One day during their Saturday tea time, Marjorie and the twins were having a pleasant conversation because they were finally leaving Broadmoor.
Right.
When out of nowhere and in the middle of a conversation, Jennifer says, "Marjorie, I'm going to have to die." And Marjorie's like,
what?
Like she said, according to actually NPR, we'll go ahead and throw that.
Oh yeah, hey.
Marjorie did an interview with NPR, and Marjorie said that she literally like laughed it off. She was like, "What? Like, don't be silly.
Like, calm down.
Like, why do you have to die? You're not ill. You're about to leave like Broadmoor."
That's literally me and you every day. Morgan, I'm literally gonna die. Taylar, you're not gonna die.
I'm like, don't be silly.
Calm down.
And Jennifer responds to this because we've decided. We have made a pact. When we leave Broadmoor, I have to give up my life to let June be free.
Who's we?
Her and June.
Oh, I was thinking like, is there something like a voice?
Oh, maybe.
Oh.
Later that day, Marjorie found out from staff that the twins had been fighting over who was going to die for weeks. And Marjorie was really disturbed at this conversation because she really thought the girls were communicating with her. Like, they were finally being open to her and that maybe they're backtracking now. Like, she got really concerned. So she reached out to some of the doctors and alerted them at Broadmoor to, maybe just monitor them. And the doctors promised to put them under really close monitoring, but it's not going to change their transfer to the Caswell Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
On March 9th, 1993, the hospital van came to transfer the twins. Jennifer wasn't really feeling too well the night before. They both got into the van, and as soon as they passed through the gates leading out of Broadmoor, Jennifer slumped over on June's shoulder and fell into a coma. She was rushed to the Princess of Wales Hospital, where she was pronounced dead at 6:30 p.m. that evening. June visited her as soon as possible, where she laid down a single red rose over her body. Autopsy reports say that Jennifer's death revealed major swelling around her heart, where her cause of death was then pronounced as myocarditis. There was no evidence of drugs or poison in her system, and her death still remains a mystery.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, wait, she didn't like kill herself.
No.
Like, this was like...
There was no poison, there was no drugs, they said she had inflammation around her heart.
It literally was...
And in one of Jennifer's journal entries said that because they were separated at this hospital, she felt, and she was so separated from June that she felt like her heart wasn't beating anymore.
Oh.
Before her death.
Oh my God. Stop. And it was like as soon as they pulled out of the gates.
Yes.
This is a creepypasta. You're telling me that this is a creepypasta.
It's not.
Morgan, there's just no way.
No.
NPR wrote about this.
Yes. It's not a creepypasta. The very next day, June was talking with everyone and anyone as if she had been doing it her entire life. Somebody who was so isolated from society, lived in a mental institution for 12 years, was able to integrate and become an entire different person in one day. She told Marjorie that day, after Jennifer died, "I'm free at last, liberated, and at last Jennifer has given up her life for me."
What?
Yes, it's insane.
I'm speechless.
I know. June was released from the hospital shortly after and began to live a relatively normal life. Once the two silent twins were reduced to one, June had no more desire to stay silent. June went on to give interviews with numerous media journalists. By 2008, she was living quietly and independently near her parents in West Wales. And in 2016, June and her sister Greta wanted to file a lawsuit against Broadmoor for ruining their lives and neglecting Jennifer's health, blaming Broadmoor for her death. But their parents, Aubrey and Gloria, refused, as it would not bring back Jennifer.
Right.
And that is the story of June and Jennifer Gibson.
I mean, yeah, there probably was a lot of neglect. Like, I'm not even lying, but like, yeah. She's just like, hey, I'm going to die when we pull out of here.
Right. Like myocarditis, it can't be.
My heart's going to swell up and die.
Yeah, that's the silent twins.
That is the craziest case I think of.
Do you think that Jennifer was possessing June? Or do you think that June was possessing Jennifer?
I don't know since.
Or do you think it was some really type of like twin, some type of like psychokinesis, like connection that like, it's just all insane.
It's like they had one soul that was split into two. Mm-hmm. And it was like they couldn't function. The soul couldn't function until it was whole. Yeah. In one body.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And then I wonder if because Jennifer was a lot more, she was the one that was like stoic, right? And like
June was always like at any like with any therapist, like she would kind of react like just with like facial expressions, mm-hmm. but Jennifer was always like.
So then I wonder if she was the one.
That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of people thought it was Jennifer.
Yeah, but it was actually June the entire time.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What happened up there, God? Like, what was going on in distribution?
And like,
of souls.
I think it's actually like really ridiculous that they spent 12 years.
I think it's absolute bullshit.
For something they did when they were teenagers.
Literally They were, I mean, like what?
They were 18, but I guess that's a young adult.
I mean, it doesn't matter because, I mean, I get like right when you turn 18, but still like you're still a kid. Right. 18 is, it doesn't matter. Like, even though you like legally are an adult, to me, and really any psychologist you'll ever talk to, it's like 25 that you actually can function. Yeah. Like, we are literally still children, apparently. Yeah. We know that.
I feel like I am.
Well, we know that we're still kids. But like, wow.
Yeah, so what do you think? Like, you think June was actually possessing Jennifer?
Yeah, but I don't know if it was like possession of like a third entity or if it was like I said with the split souls.
It had to be something of the supernatural for her to literally die as soon as they leave.
Yeah. I mean, it was when they left that fence, like the gate. I mean, it had to, you're right, it had to be like a force field, like something like a portal, like I don't know. Yeah. I don't.
And the fact that they were found like in the same positions in two
different
rooms,
sides, like
that's crazy.
And like when one would eat, the other one wouldn't. Starve. And then when the other one would indulge, then the other one would just starve. Yeah. Like, whoa.
Like they were eating for each other. Like, yes. I'm indulging so much. Like I'm gorging on food because I'm eating for you.
That is so crazy, Morgan. This is probably one of my favorite cases that you've ever covered because I've heard of this story, but I've never like listened to all the details of it.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy.
Sorry, Gizzy's panting out of nowhere.
Gizzy doesn't like this story.
And guys, as like if you're watching on YouTube, you see us keep looking over to our left, and it's because every time that Morgan would say June.
Yeah,
June. Okay, I was double checking that I didn't move. Our computer was literally glitching out,
like flying back and forth.
It was crazy looking.
And I think the first time it happened, we were saying something about back and forth, and
yes,
then the computer starts going crazy.
I literally,
and we paused it, and she goes, "How's this story end?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "She dies." And she was like, "Does she haunt people? Because I think she's here."
I literally think she's in this room right now. Should we call her forward?
No. Oh my gosh.
If you're here,
stay away.
Please don't mess with us. Okay, ready to get crimey.
Let's get crimey.